Welcome to my channel. This is JC Rocky Metal Reviews. My name is John, and today I have another one of those my favorite song off of every album videos. Today I'm spotlighting the band Judas Priest. I've been a big fan for many years. So I will go through each album and I will choose my favorite song off of each album. So let me get into it.
When we've seen Judas Priest, they've been wearing suits and ties and sitting in the courtroom. But last week, they were back in leather and shooting a new video.
Okay, so for their first album is Rockarolla. This was a very different album. They had more of like a rock sound. They didn't really develop their signature Judas Priest sound at first. So the song I went with was Run of the Mill. It's an 8.5-minute song. It's more of like a long progressive, maybe something more along the lines of like Pink Floyd. It's a very unique song in their catalog, so that's why I went with Run of the Mill. Next is Sad Wings of Destiny. This many consider like the first true metal album. And the one I went with is the first song, Victim of Changes. It's like an 8-minute song, but it's metal. It has these heavy riffs, heavy guitars, and this song really defines their sound. The next album is Sin After Sin, and the track I went with was Dissident Aggressor. Now this song I became more familiar with when Slayer covered it in 1988. But I listened to the original later on, and it's really a heavy song for the 70s, and it has really an incredible riff. So Dissident Aggressor for that one. Next is Stained Glass, and I went with Exciter. Many people think of this as like one of the first speed metal songs, possibly very influential for thrash metal. You know, it's fast, has a heavy riff, that classic Judas Priest sound, so I went with that. Next is Killing Machine, or Hellbent for Leather, if you know, for those of you in the US. I went with the Green Manalishi. I really love that song. It's a Fleetwood Mac cover, but they really make it their own. They make it heavy, and they played it on their live album. Really great song. This British Steel, I went with Grinder. So this song I really like a lot. It has this start-stop riff. Really like a heavy song, and that's just a great album overall, British Steel, but I went with one of the lesser known ones. Point of Entry. Now this album, that took a turn. It kind of went into a little more of a hard rock style. A lot of people don't like this album. It has a few gems on it. So I went with the song Desert Plains. It's a slower rock song. It's very melodic. Has a really memorable chorus. So that's a really cool song. Next is Screaming for Vengeance. And this is one of their best albums, one of their most well-known. I went with the track Bloodstone. The intro riff in the guitar reminds me a lot of early Van Halen. It just has that signature, that Judas Priest, that sound. And really love this song. So I went with that one. For Defenders of the Faith, I went with Love Bites. I guess I know this song very well. I used to have this compilation. It was a metal compilation. These were very popular back in the 80s. And I remember that song was on it, Love Bites. I remember The Price from Twisted Sister was on it. And I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about. In the comment section, let me know. But that song always stuck out for me, Love Bites. It's a slower song, but it's very dark, it's heavy. So I really like that one. Next is Turbo. And I'm going to go with, I guess it's kind of like the title track, Turbo Lover. A lot of people don't like this album. Again, it's more of hair glam or whatever you want to call it. But the songs are really well done. The songs are good. It's a solid album. And even though they use a lot of synthesizers or those synth guitars or whatever they're called, Turbo Lover, such a great chorus on that one. Ram It Down. This came out in 1988. One of their weaker albums. So for Ram It Down, I went with Blood Red Skies. This is a really good song. It's slower, but at first it has a really heavy riff. So this is one of the better tracks on this album. So I went with Blood Red Skies. Next is Painkiller. This is probably my favorite album. It's such a heavy album. It's just the album that just like defines heavy metal in general. The title track, I love it. It kind of like got a little overplayed for me, so I went with Touch of Evil. Such a dark song, so heavy. It just really sticks with you, that song. So Touch of Evil with that one. Next, this is the period when Rob Halford left. A lot of people don't like these albums. They're very heavy. They have the new vocalist, I forget his name, I'll write it later. But for Jugulator, I went with Burn in Hell. Now, they really like stepped up the heaviness in these albums. More into something more like almost thrashy, maybe like Pantera, that type of heaviness. So I went with Burn in Hell with that one. And for Demolition, I went with Hell is Home. That song is very heavy, but it's also very melodic. It's very memorable. You know, the chorus stays with you. So I went with that one, Hell is Home. Next, Rob Halford makes a comeback. Angel of Retribution. I went with first song, Judas Rising. It's the album opener. Has a really, you know, the heavy riff with the guitars is like a shredding riff, and it just brings back their sound, their original sound with Rob at the helm again. So I love this album, and I went with Judas Rising. Next is the album Nostradamus. This is a long album. I think they tried to make something really incredible along the lines of something like Pink Floyd or Queen. It's a concept album, but they really missed the mark with it. So it was kind of hard to pick a song. I gave it a listen, and the one I came up with is the song Persecution. It just has a very big sound, more of like a prog metal, but that's probably like the only good song I could have picked off of that album. Next is Redeemer of Souls. This is one of my favorites. This is, I think this one stands up against some of their best. I went with March of the Damned. It's kind of like has that old school sound, that old school Judas Priest heavy song, and I really love the riff on that one. And with Firepower, this is another great album. It's just so many songs to pick on Firepower. I went with Spectre. It just has that classic Judas Priest sound. It's also a very catchy riff.
Okay, thanks for watching. Comment below. Let me know, what do you think? What are some of your favorite Judas Priest songs from whatever album you want, or do all of them if you wish. So let me know in the comment section. Let's get a conversation going. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I do rock and metal reviews. I do lists. I do pretty much everything. I upload almost every day. And other than that, you can find me on Facebook at JC Rock and Metal Reviews. And I will see you in the next one. So keep on rocking.